He came home expecting chaos, but what he found was stillness so sacred it felt like God had walked in before him. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made him afraid. Kevin Morrison had lost his wife in a moment that shattered everything, and though the twins survived, nothing had been whole since. He'd fired 5 nannies in 9 months. Not one could calm the storm. But on that Tuesday afternoon, as he opened the bedroom door, he saw something he couldn't explain. A woman he barely knew, holding the only 2 people left in his life, as if they had always belonged in her arms. Kevin Morrison didn't rush in. He stood at the front door for a few seconds longer than usual, because something was wrong. The house was quiet. Too quiet. There were no footsteps running, no crying, no shouting, no broken plates, no tiny fists banging on floors. He called out once, "Jordan?" No answer. "Justin?" Still nothing. He dropped his keys and stepped forward, his voice breaking on the 3rd try. "Boys?" Still no answer. He moved through the hallway slowly, afraid of what he might find. The kitchen light was off. The playroom was untouched, toys still scattered from that morning. The silence was so heavy, it felt alive. And for a moment, Kevin thought the worst. His chest tightened. His mind ran back to the accident, to the hospital, to the night he almost lost all 3 of them. The boys had survived, but they never really came back, whole. Not emotionally, not spiritually. They cried in ways no one could quiet. They broke things no one could fix. And Kevin, he had learned to survive by leaving, by pouring himself into the one thing that made sense: work. 5 nannies, 9 months. None of them could reach the boys. They all left or were sent away. And now, silence. He climbed the stairs, one hand gripping the railing like a man walking into a storm. Only this time, there was no storm. Just stillness. A stillness that scared him. He reached the bedroom door. His heart beat loud in his ears. He didn't know what he was about to see, but he knew it would change him. Then he opened the door and froze. The breath left his body, because there, in the center of the bed, his bed, lay a woman he barely remembered hiring. Annie, the maid, the quiet one. She was asleep, fully dressed, still, and on either side of her, his sons. One curled into her chest, the other clinging to her apron like a blanket. Their eyes were closed, their cheeks still damp from crying, but they were asleep. Real sleep. Soft sleep. The kind of sleep children only know when they feel safe. Kevin didn't speak, didn't move. He just stood there, watching the impossible scene before him. 2 boys who hadn't rested in years, a woman no one had expected, and a silence so holy it felt like God had stepped into the room first. Before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. And if your life has ever felt like a storm that wouldn't stop, I pray this story reaches your heart. Because sometimes, the miracle isn't the storm ending. It's someone walking in and staying. Let's begin. Kevin didn't know how long he stood in the doorway. It could have been seconds. It could have been 10 minutes. Time didn't move the way it used to, not since the funeral. Not since he stood in another doorway hospital, this time staring at 2 tiny babies wired to machines, their mother already gone. He gripped the frame now like it was holding him upright. His briefcase slid quietly to the floor. He didn't notice. All he could see was the stillness. Annie's arm lay gently curved around Justin's back, like she'd always known exactly how much space a child needs to feel safe. Jordan had his small hand curled into her apron, the same one she'd worn every day since she started last week. She'd barely spoken to Kevin, never made eye contact unless asked. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not like this. She was supposed to vacuum, wipe down windows, fold laundry. That's what they'd agreed. But here she was, asleep on his bed, with his sons wrapped around her as if they had known her their whole lives. The room was quiet. Not dead quiet. Living quiet. The kind of peace that makes you want to cry without knowing why. Kevin's throat tightened. He stepped back once, as if unsure whether to leave or wake them. His shadow moved across the floor. Justin stirred, but didn't wake. He nestled deeper into Annie's side. Kevin stayed still. He didn't want to break it. Didn't want to ruin whatever had happened in that room before he arrived. Because something had happened. He could feel it in the air. Not heavy. Just different. Like grief had finally let go of the furniture. He looked at their faces, his boys. They looked younger somehow. Or maybe just softer. Not tight with exhaustion. Not bracing for rejection. Just asleep. They hadn't done that in years, not without screaming themselves hoarse first, not without waking every hour. And now, here they were, breathing in unison with a woman no one had trained, certified, or sent from an agency. Annie shifted slightly in her sleep, just enough to pull the blanket higher over Justin's leg. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't performative. It was instinct. Like something maternal had bloomed in her without permission. Kevin exhaled. The sound startled even him. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. He turned, walked quietly back into the hallway, and closed the door. He didn't go far. He sat on the floor just outside the bedroom, back against the wall, knees bent, like a boy who'd just been grounded. He didn't know what to do with what he'd seen. This wasn't in the books. It wasn't in any grief counseling manual. It wasn't part of the professional boundaries guide he kept on his office shelf. But it was real. Undeniably real. For the first time in 14 months, the house didn't feel like a museum of what used to be. It felt occupied. Like someone had come in and dared to be there, not manage, not survive, but just be. Kevin leaned his head back against the wall. He remembered Lauren, his wife, sitting in that same bedroom years ago, humming softly while feeding the boys at 2 a.m. He used to watch her in moments like that and wonder how she made it look so easy. And now, he'd just watched a stranger do the same. Not with bottles, not with lullabies, but with presence. No words, no strategy, just stillness. He wasn't ready to name what that stirred in him. Wasn't ready to ask how or why or what this meant. But something in him had cracked just a little. Not enough to flood, just enough to breathe. From behind the door, he heard a soft sigh. A child's sigh. Then the deep, quiet breathing of sleep, the kind that only happens when someone else is near enough to catch your fear. Kevin looked down at his watch. He'd been home for 17 minutes. And already, the house was changing. Not loud, not dramatic, but gently. Like God had whispered through the silence. This is holy ground. And Kevin, for once, didn't try to control it. He just stayed sitting in the hallway, with nothing in his hands, and a heart that didn't quite know what to do with its own softness. Not yet, but maybe soon. Kevin didn't speak to Annie the next morning. Not at first. He stood in the hallway outside the kitchen, still in his dress shirt from the night before, tie half loosened, watching. The boys were at the table quietly, unbelievably eating eggs. Justin wore mismatched socks. Jordan had syrup on his cheek, but they were sitting, not screaming, not fighting. And Annie was just moving through the kitchen like she belonged there. Not like she owned the space, but like someone who knew how to soften it. She flipped pancakes with one hand, handed Jordan a napkin with the other, and poured water without a sound. She didn't glance at Kevin, didn't ask how he slept, didn't offer explanation for what he saw the night before. It was like she knew if she talked about it, the spell might break. So she didn't, and neither did he. But then, right before he turned to leave, she said it. Still soft, still quiet. Before your day starts, I need to ask for something. Kevin paused in the doorway. She didn't face him. She was helping Justin peel the corner off a sticker stuck to the table. He hesitated. Okay. I need a week, she said. That caught him. A week? She nodded, eyes still on the sticker. My way. He frowned slightly. What does that mean? She finally looked up, calm, unreadable. No phones, no shoes in the living room, no new staff, just 20 minutes a day. On the floor, with them. You say it out loud. I'm the one who stays. Kevin blinked. "I'm not here to be managed, miss. I'm not here to raise them," she interrupted gently. "I'm here to keep this house soft enough that maybe love can land." She didn't say it like a challenge. She said it like a prayer. Then she turned back to the boys, wiped syrup from Justin's chin, and whispered something that made him giggle. Kevin didn't respond. But when she pointed to the living room floor after breakfast and patted the cushion beside Jordan, he sat. It felt ridiculous at first. The kind of thing therapists suggest in glossy brochures: sit with your kids, get on their level, be present. Kevin hadn't done that in a long time. The twins ignored him at first. Jordan lined up crayons. Justin built a quiet fort with couch cushions. Kevin watched, stiff, uncomfortable, unsure where to place his hands. He reached for his phone. Annie, folding laundry nearby, didn't scold him. She just said softly, "Let them lead. You're here to follow." He dropped the phone back into his pocket. A few minutes later, Justin handed him a crayon, not like an invitation, more like a test. Kevin took it, drew a lopsided sun. Jordan laughed. "That's not how Mummy drew it." Kevin's breath caught. Annie didn't jump in. She just kept folding, letting the moment hang. It hurt, but it didn't destroy him. The timer Annie had set buzzed quietly after 20 minutes. Kevin hadn't noticed the time pass. He stood, a little slower, and walked back to his room with socks full of crumbs and a mind full of questions. The next morning, he came down early. Annie was already in the kitchen. No makeup, no small talk, just pancakes again. He cleared his throat. "I'm here." She didn't turn. Socks off. He sighed, but obeyed. That day, he sat on the rug while Justin showed him a feelings chart he'd drawn with colors. Blue was sad, red was angry, yellow was tired. "What's green?" Kevin asked. Justin shrugged. "Green is when Annie stays." Kevin blinked, swallowed hard. "Okay." Jordan handed him tape to help build a paper rocket. Kevin fumbled it. Annie passed scissors wordlessly. That night, Kevin wrote a single word on a sticky note and placed it inside his nightstand. Exhausted. He didn't even know why he did it. Maybe because it felt honest. Maybe because it didn't need to be read. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering why 20 minutes on the floor had done more than months of therapy. Down the hall, the boys slept. No screaming, no footsteps, just breath. And in the room beside them, the quiet maid, with no resume for healing, was folding socks like it was sacred work. Kevin came downstairs early again. He was barefoot, sleeves rolled, phone nowhere in sight. He stood tall in the doorway, almost proud of himself. "I'm sitting now," he said stiffly, nodding toward the rug. Annie didn't look up from the laundry basket. "It doesn't count if you're waiting to leave." Her voice was calm, not sarcastic, not impressed. Just true. Kevin swallowed the edge in his throat and sat anyway. The boys were already mid-project. Justin had turned a cereal box into what he called a moon station. Jordan was making a paper rocket and arguing over who would get to be the pilot. Kevin leaned in, tried to follow. "I'll help," he said quickly, grabbing the tape. His hands moved fast, too fast. The wings bent unevenly. The rocket collapsed. Jordan frowned. "That's not right." "I'm fixing it," Kevin said, frustrated. "No," Justin said. "You're doing it loud." The words hit him harder than he expected. Annie, from the laundry corner, said nothing. Jordan huffed, grabbed the paper back, and in the process knocked over his milk. The cup hit the rug, white puddle everywhere. Justin's eyes widened. Jordan froze. Kevin jumped up, reaching for paper towels, already apologizing for the mess. It's okay, I've got it." Annie crossed the room slowly. No panic, no raised voice. She knelt beside Jordan and whispered, "Look." The boy didn't move. "Nothing broke," she said gently. "Just a spill." Kevin stood frozen, towels in hand. Annie turned to him and touched his wrist, not to stop him, but to slow him. "Let him see it can fall and still be okay," she said. Kevin looked down at the milk-soaked rug, then at his son's eyes wide, bracing for punishment. And something in him cracked. Not loud, not obvious, just cracked. He dropped the towels and knelt beside them. "It's all right," he said. "Really?" Jordan's bottom lip trembled, then settled. He nodded. Justin crawled over and placed the crumpled rocket on Kevin's knee. "It's okay if it's bent," he said. Kevin nodded. "Yeah." It was quiet for a while. No speeches, no scolding, just three people sitting near a spill like it was a normal part of life. Annie rose quietly and returned to folding. Later that night, Kevin sat on the edge of his bed. The house was silent again, not frightening now, just still. He looked at the rug near his feet, the same place Lauren used to sit while brushing her hair after bath time. He used to take it for granted, the quiet rituals, the unmeasured moments. He hadn't known presence wasn't about perfection. He reached for the drawer in his nightstand, pulled out a sticky note, and wrote 2 words. "Let go." Folded it once, pressed it between the others. Down the hall, a giggle broke the silence, then a tiny footstep, then quiet again. Kevin leaned back into the pillows and closed his eyes. He wasn't sure what was changing in the house. But something was, slowly, softly, and for the first time in a long time. He didn't want to miss it. The house was beginning to breathe again. Not loudly, not in ways you'd notice from the outside, but inside, little things were shifting. The boys had started whispering their wishes to the basil plant on the windowsill. "Please don't let Annie leave," Justin said one morning, misting the leaves like it mattered. Kevin watched from the hallway. He didn't interrupt. He was still learning when to step in and when to simply be near. Annie had introduced quiet rituals. No assigned toast slices, no shoes in the living room. A rhythm of small choices that gave the boys freedom without chaos. Jordan started building safety forts out of cushions. Justin lined up socks in color order and named each one after animals. Kevin didn't understand it, not completely. But the house felt less brittle. One Saturday morning, his sister showed up. Victoria. Sharp heels, pressed collar, a voice that didn't wait for silence. She walked in like someone still mourning her image of the family. Her eyes scanned the room the way people check a room for fire damage. "This isn't what Forbes spreads look like," she said, stepping over a crayon. Kevin raised an eyebrow. "Morning to you too." She made her way to the kitchen, heels clacking against tile. And then she saw Annie. Annie was barefoot, sitting cross-legged on the floor with the twins, pancake batter on her sleeve, hair half tied back. They were all laughing at something Jordan had whispered, a joke about dragons and cereal. Victoria froze. "This is the maid," she said, low but cutting. Kevin didn't answer. Annie stood slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes," she said, calm, present. "I'm Annie." Victoria nodded once, tightly, then turned to Kevin. "You're letting the help sit on the floor with your children now?" The room went quiet. The twins looked between the adults like animals, sensing a shift in the weather. Kevin didn't say anything. Not because he agreed, but because the words got stuck in his throat. Annie didn't flinch. She just crouched again and returned to the boys. "I'm not here to raise them," she said gently, without looking up. "I'm here to keep this place soft enough for love to land." The words landed like a stone in the middle of a still lake. Even the pancakes stopped sizzling. Victoria blinked, clearly thrown off. "I don't think you understand how this looks," she said eventually, pulling Kevin aside. "This woman, no training, no clearance, no background in childcare, is emotionally entangling herself with your heirs. You're going to have a problem. Custody, press, optics." Kevin stared at the counter, said nothing. Not because he believed her, but because he didn't yet know how to defend what he hadn't fully claimed. That night, Annie didn't say goodnight to the boys. She vacuumed quietly, washed their cups, folded towels. But when the twins asked where she was, Kevin didn't know how to answer. "She's just giving space," he said. But the boys didn't want space. Jordan refused to sleep with the light off. Justin whispered, "Why didn't Annie say the dragon prayer?" Kevin sat on the edge of the bed, unsure what to say. He rubbed his forehead and exhaled through his hands. The house felt quieter again, but not in a good way. The kind of quiet that comes after something has been removed. That night, Kevin watched the hallway for a long time, waiting for the sound of her footsteps, but they didn't come. The next morning, the boys ate toast in silence. No plant wishes, no fort, just small hands, picking at crusts. Kevin stood by the sink, holding a coffee cup he wasn't drinking. He watched Annie fold a dish towel slowly, like it was the only thing left in the world that wouldn't fall apart. He opened his mouth to speak, but didn't. And Annie? She never looked up. The vase was already broken when he walked into the living room. The one Victoria insisted stay front and center, the last thing of their mothers that hadn't been moved or boxed or softened for the twins' sake. Cut crystal, heavy, unforgiving. Shards glittered across the hardwood like ice. Kevin froze at the sight. His first instinct wasn't fear. It was memory of Victoria's voice, just days ago. "You're letting this maid into their space. It's dangerous." Annie stood a few feet away, broom in hand. The boys were nowhere in sight. "I didn't hear it fall," Kevin said softly. Annie looked at him, calm but unreadable. "I didn't touch it," she said. He didn't doubt her. But the pressure in his chest tightened anyway. She didn't defend herself further, just swept. Victoria's words played again in his mind, like a sermon he hadn't asked to hear, but couldn't unlisten to. "Maybe," Kevin began, voice low, "maybe you should take the rest of the day off." Annie didn't move. "Is that what you want?" He hesitated. "No," he admitted, "but maybe it's simpler." She didn't argue. Didn't ask who he was protecting. She just nodded once. Quiet, measured. "I'll go," she said, still sweeping. Then added, gently, "Simple doesn't always mean safe." Kevin stood there, watching her brush broken glass into a dustpan like it wasn't about the vase at all, like she knew what was really being swept up. The house returned to quiet that night, but not the warm kind. The boys felt it immediately. Dinner was tense. Jordan pushed his food around, refusing to eat unless Annie came back. Justin asked 3 times if she was on break or gone forever. Kevin didn't answer either of them. By bedtime, the silence had thickened. The safety fort was gone. The dragon's socks sat untouched on the radiator. Jordan wouldn't brush his teeth. Justin curled up on the floor beside the bed, holding Annie's forgotten apron like it was a blanket. "She didn't say the prayer," he whispered. "She always says it." Kevin kneeled beside him, trying to coax him into bed. "She'll be back tomorrow," he offered. Justin looked up, eyes wet. "She's the only one who stays." The words hit like a weight in Kevin's chest. He sat on the floor for a long time after they'd fallen asleep. Not because he was tired, but because he didn't know what else to do with the guilt pressing into his lungs. Around 1 a.m., he went downstairs, poured a glass of water he didn't drink. Then, for the first time in weeks, he opened the security footage. He wasn't even sure why. Maybe to find proof, maybe to clear the fog. The footage rolled. Victoria, gesturing with her usual flair. The boys chasing a marble across the floor, her heel catching on the rug. The corner of the table, the vase tilting, falling, shattering. Annie entering moments later. The broom, the silence, the calm. It hadn't been her. It had never been her. Kevin closed his eyes. He hadn't accused her, not out loud, but he hadn't defended her either. And that's its own kind of betrayal. He leaned back in the chair, hands folded over his chest, as if trying to press the shame back down. But it stayed, right where it hurt. In the morning, the boys woke up crying. Justin was still holding the apron. Jordan had wet the bed, something he hadn't done in weeks. Kevin didn't call his assistant, didn't scroll his phone. He just sat at the foot of the bed and watched the space where Annie usually stood quiet, humming under her breath, folding blankets the way you fold memories that still ache. And that's when it happened. Something inside him shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, but enough. He stood, grabbed his coat, and walked out the front door without a word. Not to escape, but to find her. It took him 2 trains and a short walk through Harlem to find her. He didn't bring flowers, didn't rehearse an apology, didn't know what door number he was even looking for until he saw her sitting on the front step. Hair tied back, apron folded on her lap, like something she couldn't throw away. She looked up, saw him, didn't flinch, didn't smile, just waited. Kevin approached slowly, hands in his coat pockets like a boy walking into detention. The air between them was full of things neither of them had language for. "I saw the footage," he said quietly. Annie didn't react. "It wasn't you," he added. "It was Victoria." She nodded once, like she already knew. Not just about the vase, about everything. Kevin stood there, silent. The wind moved around them. Leaves scraped the sidewalk like whispers, trying to say what he couldn't. "You didn't break the vase," he said again. "But I broke something else." He meant it. He meant the trust, the room, the quiet she had built with bare hands. She looked at him then, not cold, but clear. "I'm not your redemption arc," she said softly. "I'm not your storyline. I'm not here so you can feel like you're healing." Kevin swallowed hard. "I know." "No, you don't," she replied, but gently. "You asked me to leave, not because you believed I did it, but because it was easier than standing in front of someone who might cost you comfort." She wasn't angry. That made it worse. "I didn't know what to do," he said. "You still don't," she answered. The words didn't cut like knives. They landed like mirrors. She looked down at the apron in her hands, ran her thumb over the edge. "You want presents?" she said. "Earn it." Kevin sat down beside her, slowly, not touching, not pushing, just close enough to breathe the same November air. A long silence passed. Then she added, so softly he almost didn't catch it, "You don't fix children with structure. You don't fix grief with routine. You don't fix people at all." He nodded, eyes wet, but not blinking. "I keep trying to do it right," he whispered, "but every time I try, I lose something." Annie turned to him. Finally, fully. "It's not about doing it right, Kevin," she said. "It's about not leaving the room when it gets messy." That's when he broke. Not into tears, but into stillness. The kind of stillness that only comes when the pretending runs out. "I wanted to be there for them," he said. "I just didn't know how." Annie held his gaze. "Then don't walk away next time," she said. "That's the only how." She stood up, took the apron with her, didn't slam the door when she went inside, but didn't leave it open either. Kevin remained on the step, unmoving, uncertain. The city moved around him, cars, footsteps, a dog barking down the block, but time felt paused. Something had broken. But maybe it was the shell. Maybe it was the version of him that thought love was about control, about plans, about not making mistakes. He sat for a while longer, alone, then pulled a folded note from his coat pocket, blank on the front. He took out a pen and wrote slowly, deliberately, "Weather the storm, name it first." He didn't leave the note for her. He folded it, placed it in his wallet, and walked back to the train. He didn't know if she'd come back, didn't know how to fix the quiet he'd broken, but he knew one thing. Next time, he wasn't leaving the room. Annie didn't come back right away, but she didn't leave completely, either. On Monday, the dishes were still washed. The boys' laundry was folded on the end of their beds. The basil had water. She was there, just not in the room. Kevin felt the difference. The boys did too. They didn't throw tantrums. They didn't ask about her. They just grew quieter, like something inside them had curled back in. Kevin tried to fill the gap, morning pancakes, story time, even a new toy rocket from the bookstore. But it wasn't the noise they missed. It was her stillness, her listening, her being. By Thursday evening, the weather shifted. The kind of chill that climbs under the doorframe and settles in your bones. The boys were slower at dinner. Justin barely ate. Kevin noticed the flush in his cheeks, the gloss in his eyes. He pressed a hand to his forehead. Burning. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, brushing the hair back. "You okay?" Justin didn't answer, just leaned in, quiet and hot. Kevin carried him upstairs, heart pounding, unsure why he felt so afraid. Fevers weren't new, but this one felt too quiet, too still. By the time he laid him down, Justin was shivering under the covers, whimpering. Kevin opened the medicine cabinet, fumbled the thermometer, dropped the cap. His hands were shaking. "Jordan," he called, "go sit on the couch, okay? I'll come read in a minute." But Jordan didn't move. He stood in the doorway, wide-eyed, whispering, "Where's Annie?" Kevin didn't answer, because he didn't know how to say, "I asked her to leave." Not out loud, but in all the ways that mattered. He turned back to Justin, wiped his forehead with a cold cloth. The boy cried softly, not the loud tantrum kind, the kind that comes when the body doesn't understand what's wrong. Kevin tried calling the pediatrician, left a message, tried pacing the hall, tried Googling. None of it helped. Then, a knock. Soft, barely there. Kevin opened the door to find Annie. No coat, no umbrella, just her, and the look of someone who already knew. She didn't say anything, just stepped inside, hands empty. He moved aside. She walked past him like she'd never left, straight to the bedroom. She knelt beside the bed and touched Justin's hand, not rushed, not anxious, just there. He settled almost instantly. Kevin watched from the doorway, and something in him, something stubborn and proud and self-protecting, broke. "Why did you come back?" he asked quietly. Annie didn't look up. "Because this is when it matters." Kevin stepped in, unsure, trembling. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. Annie reached for the thermometer, handed it to him. "You don't have to know," she said. "You just have to stay." He sat down beside her, placed the thermometer under Justin's arm, watched the numbers climb. He didn't move, didn't reach for his phone, didn't ask what came next. He stayed, all night, holding his son as the fever climbed, then broke. Annie didn't take over. She didn't leave. She just sat across the room, folding socks, watching, humming, something barely audible. And when the sun finally cracked through the window and Justin stirred against Kevin's chest, sweaty and safe, Kevin closed his eyes and exhaled. Not relief. Something deeper, the kind of breath that only comes after staying through the storm. Annie rose quietly, walked to the kitchen, left one small sticky note on the fridge. He didn't check his phone. He stayed. Kevin stood in the hallway, reading it over and over. Not because he didn't understand it, but because, for the first time in a long time, it was true. The fever passed, but something stayed behind. Not illness, something warmer. A quiet rhythm began to return to the house. Mornings carried soft footsteps and shared toast. The boys stopped asking when Annie would leave. They just called her name like it belonged to the room. Kevin moved slower now. He didn't fill silence with noise. He learned to listen not just to his sons, but to himself. He still stumbled, still reached for control when things got messy. But now, when he did, Annie didn't correct him. She just looked at him, and sometimes that was enough. Until the photo. It showed up on a gossip site late on a Thursday. Kevin in the garden, shirt sleeves rolled, smiling. Annie beside him, barefoot. Justin, asleep in her lap. Jordan handing her a daisy. The caption read, "Billionaire's Maid or more. Sources. Claim, emotional entanglement behind closed doors." Victoria called within the hour. "You need to handle this," she snapped. "You've got investors watching, custody lawyers watching. This doesn't look like grief recovery. This looks like carelessness." Kevin didn't speak. He was staring at the photo, the way Justin's cheek was resting against Annie's shoulder. He knew that moment. He remembered it exactly. It wasn't romance. It wasn't scandal. It was sanctuary. "She's making you look unprofessional," Victoria continued. "Unstable. You need boundaries." That word boundaries echoed in his head like a warning bell. He thought about Annie's voice, soft in the kitchen one morning. Boundaries aren't fences. They're invitations to walk honestly. Kevin looked at the boys, now asleep on the couch, under a shared blanket. He looked at the hallway, where Annie's shoes sat quietly by the door, the only ones ever removed without being asked. He hung up without replying. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table writing something by hand, A new kind of document, not for business, for home. A rule book, not full of policies, just truths. When morning came, Annie found it taped to the fridge. Handwritten, simple. House rules. We will not hide the people who love us. We will not treat care as scandal. We will not pretend grief follows a schedule. We will stay. She stood, reading it with one hand on her apron. Didn't say a word. Kevin walked in behind her, coffee in hand, eyes softer than usual. I can't protect my sons, he said quietly, if I keep protecting my image. Annie turned slowly, meeting his gaze. I'm not your sin, she said, and I'm not your salvation either. I know, he said. You're just here. She nodded once. That's enough. Jordan ran in seconds later, shouting about a robot made of spoons. Justin followed, dragging a cardboard spaceship. Kevin crouched with them, started taping a spoon to a juice box without hesitation. Annie sat on the floor nearby, folding paper wings. No fanfare. No forgiveness speeches. Just presence. By the time the spaceship was finished, the kitchen looked like a disaster. Spoons, stickers, flour, and the boys were glowing. Kevin stood, turned toward Annie, and asked softly, "Can we leave the mess for a little while?" She nodded. Mess means they were building something. And in that moment, Kevin realized, so were they. The storm rolled in on a Sunday. Rain slammed the windows. Wind whistled down the chimney like something ancient. The power flickered once, then went out. Kevin lit a candle in the hallway and called the boys' names. No answer. His stomach dropped. Jordan? Justin? He turned the corner and found Jordan huddled behind the couch, arms wrapped around a blanket. Justin was gone. Panic tightened in Kevin's chest. He checked the bathroom, the kitchen, his bedroom, empty. And then a sound, soft, small, a sniffle. He followed it to the stairwell. Justin was sitting on the bottom step, knees to his chest, tears shining in the candlelight. Kevin didn't run to him. He walked. Slow, careful, present. He knelt at the foot of the stairs. I see you, he said gently. Justin didn't look up. Can I sit here? Kevin asked. The boy nodded, barely. So Kevin sat, side by side. No rush, no fixing. They counted the scared together. 1 breath, 2, 3. Justin whispered, I thought the dark was going to eat the house. Kevin nodded. Sometimes, I think that too. They sat there a long while, listening to the storm like it was telling them a secret. Later that night, when the lights came back on, the boys ran to Annie. Let's build a lighthouse, Jordan said, so we don't get lost again. So they did. Out of cardboard. Spoons, paper towel rolls, glow sticks taped to the inside. It didn't blink, but it glowed. They placed it in the center of the living room. Kevin stared at it longer than he meant to. Annie touched his shoulder. You're learning to stay, she said softly. That's the real light. He didn't answer, just nodded, took a deep breath, and let it settle inside him. That night, Kevin tucked the boys in, read 2 stories, sang the dragon song with the wrong words, tied the blanket around their shoulders like a superhero cape. And just before he turned off the lamp, Justin said, Daddy? Yeah? You're not scared of the dark anymore? Kevin paused. No, he said, not when I'm with you. The next morning, Annie found the boys pressing their thumbs into clay, tiny fingerprints beneath their names. Kevin did the same. Under his name, he carved 1 word, anchor. He didn't look at Annie when he did it, but she saw, and smiled, just barely. Weeks passed. The vase wasn't replaced. The fort stayed up longer than it should have. Kevin started braiding hair badly, burning toast, listening to knock-knock jokes all the way through. Annie never took credit. She folded towels, cut fruit, clapped when he got both socks to match. On the anniversary of Lauren's death, the house was quiet. Not heavy, just soft. Kevin lit a candle. Not out of ritual, out of memory. Then, after the boys fell asleep, he opened the drawer beside his bed. Dozens of sticky notes, folded and stacked. Exhausted. Let go. He stayed. Name it first. He added one more. She stayed, so I could learn how to. He pressed it down gently. Didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it finally could, without undoing him. Outside, the lighthouse still glowed. Not flashy. Not perfect. Just enough.